Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the most recent installment of our Clean Power Plan webinar series. My name is Sarah Jackson. I'm a Senior Associate at Synapse Energy Economics, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. I'm joined here in Cambridge by Jennifer Calais and Kenji Takahashi, both Senior Associates at Synapse with a tremendous amount of experience on energy efficiency. This webinar will provide an overview of our just-released fact sheet and handbook on strategies for using energy efficiency as a compliance mechanism for achieving the goals of the final Clean Power Plan. Check the chat box in WebEx for a link to those resources. Just a few logistics before we get started. The webinar is being recorded and will be distributed with the slides to all attendees tomorrow. It will also be posted on our website. All attendee lines will be muted for the entire webinar. Jen and Kenji will present for about 30 minutes, and then we'll be opening it up to questions from the audience. So if you'd like to ask a question during the Q&A portion of the webinar, please send an email to webinar@synapse-energy.com. That's webinar@synapse-energy.com. I'll be monitoring the questions as they come in, and we'll pass them on to our presenters. We'll do our best to answer all relevant questions, but if we don't get to yours, please feel free to follow up with us afterwards. Finally, if you're having any technical difficulties, like we just were, please use the WebEx chat feature, and our technical support guru will do her best to help you. For those of you who may not know Synapse, we are a small consulting firm located in Cambridge, Massachusetts, specializing in energy, economic, and environmental topics. Check our website to learn more about us. Here's a quick overview of the topics for today's discussion. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jen to tell us about fairness and why we should care about energy efficiency in the context of the Clean Power Plan. Jen?
Thank you, Sarah. So some state policies, such as building codes and standards, treat all customers and businesses pretty fairly. But fairness is coming up more and more as a particular concern in states that have been leading the way with aggressive savings targets for ratepayer-funded efforts. Ratepayer-funded efforts are a portfolio of energy efficiency programs administered by utilities or third-party administrators using funds collected from ratepayers by utilities. And public utility commissions have regulatory authority over these efforts and review and approve the program administrator plans and progress reports. Ratepayer-funded efforts are different from other efficiency efforts, as all ratepayers fund these efforts with a small additional charge on each kilowatt hour of electricity they use. So as a result, it's really important that all ratepayers have the opportunity to experience the benefits. The fairness issue comes up because not all electric customers have equal access to customer-funded efficiency programs. Efficiency budgets are often limited in response to concerns about customer fairness. And while all customers experience some system-wide benefits of efficiency, we do know that customers who participate in these programs experience greater benefits. And just to clarify, system-wide benefits include, for example, avoided generation, transmission, and distribution costs. And when we're talking about participant benefits, those include, in addition, lower bills due to electric savings, fuel savings, water savings, and also lower equipment maintenance costs. So with all of these benefits, why isn't everyone installing energy efficiency measures? Energy efficiency measures include services or equipment, such as efficient lighting, that reduce energy use by homes and businesses. And in general, all customers experience barriers to installing energy efficiency. Some of these include awareness of the efficiency measures, upfront costs to install the measures, and availability of efficient products. However, there are several types of electricity customers that are, in fact, even harder to reach and therefore are less likely to experience the benefits of energy efficiency. Examples of these hard-to-reach, well, actually, let me step back and just say that hard-to-reach is a term that identifies customers that have additional barriers to implementing energy efficiency as compared to the average customer. So the two diagrams on this slide, on the left-hand side, I'm going to talk first about residential customers. So residential customers that are commonly thought of as hard to reach include low-income and multifamily customers, as well as renters. Low-income customers have limited time and money to commit to energy efficiency projects. Renters and landlords can have kind of a split incentive issue. That's where one party pays the energy bills, but the other party pays for the upfront investment in the energy efficiency equipment. And as a result, the person who's the decision maker may not really have the incentive to choose the efficient equipment. Multifamily housing is a very diverse customer sector, and so that often presents a challenge. Properties can differ in size and use. Some properties are commercial and others are considered residential. Some properties are master metered, some have meters for each unit. And properties have different ownership structures. So some are condominiums, so they're owned. Others are rented. Some are market-rated housing, and others are affordable living for low-income customers. If we go to the diagram on the right-hand side, there are two types of commercial customers that are more commonly thought of as hard to reach, and those include small businesses and government customers. And these customers also typically have limited time and resources to commit to energy efficiency. So all of these hard-to-reach customers are less likely to participate and less likely to experience the benefits of participation. So energy efficiency programs can enhance fairness by removing the barriers to participation for these customers. So how is lower participation in energy efficiency by some customers a clean power plan issue? EPA recognizes that there is a lot of cost-effective energy efficiency that has not been implemented to date, available at a very low cost. In its fact sheet on energy efficiency in the Clean Power Plan, EPA identifies energy efficiency as a strategy that many states should use for compliance and can use for compliance. And we expect that states will propose to ramp up their energy efficiency in compliance plans, and this includes ratepayer-funded efficiency efforts. Going to number 2 on this slide, so EPA has demonstrated a commitment to fairness in 2 ways, one with its Clean Energy Incentive Program and also through requirements to address environmental justice concerns. And actually, Synapse just did 2 webinars, the last 2 webinars, in fact, on both of these mechanisms and also on environmental justice. So just to review briefly, the Clean Energy Incentive Program is a Clean Power Plan mechanism to increase low-income efficiency efforts. And while the program is relatively short-term, it's also available before the compliance period starts. The program can help states set up the foundation for fair efficiency, a foundation that can be maintained throughout the compliance period and beyond. Building from the discussion of environmental justice that happened in the last webinar, it's also important to note that EPA has this requirement for fair treatment under the Clean Power Plan. And it's important to also include ensuring that the significant benefits that are possible with energy efficiency are shared with as many customers as possible. So fairness can, in fact, also consider maximizing participation in energy efficiency programs. It's important to note that while this is a Clean Power Plan issue, by no means should states wait until the Clean Power Plan compliance period to take action. So states have all the tools they need to improve the fairness of their programs now, and they can do it starting today. The other thing I will note is some of these strategies that we're going to review may take some time to implement, so starting earlier rather than later is also a benefit. So the purpose of today's webinar is to provide an introduction to 10 strategies that we've laid out that states, public utility commissions, and program administrators can use to overcome barriers and increase energy efficiency adoption by traditionally hard-to-reach customers. As said, most of these strategies are not new. They're in use today by states, and these states offer good case studies for how these strategies can be implemented. As Sarah mentioned, there's an accompanying handbook and fact sheet on this topic available on our website. And the accompanying handbook can help states improve fairness in advance of or along with Clean Power Plan compliance, as I said before. The handbook offers some additional information, including discussing each strategy in detail, including how it promotes fairness, its potential to save more energy, the actions states must take to put the strategy in place, and examples of states, public utility commissions, and program administrators that have already implemented these strategies. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Kenji Takahashi, to walk through the 10 strategies.
Thank you, Jen. So I'm going to talk about 10 strategies to increase participation in energy efficiency. The 10 strategies are summarized under 4 categories here, as you can see in this slide. Number 1, state policies and initiatives. Number 2, Ratepayer-Funded Energy Efficiency Program policies. Number 3, Ratepayer-Funded Energy Efficiency Program designs. And finally, Ratepayer-Funded Energy Efficiency Program funding. Next slide, please. So now the first one, first category, state policy and initiative. These are generally low-cost or no-cost strategies and do not require ratepayer funding. The first strategy, codes and standards. These set minimum energy efficiency requirements for buildings and appliances. Unlike voluntary energy efficiency programs, codes and standards make energy efficiency available to all consumers by making energy-saving practices, products, as the new norm, rather than cutting edge. These approaches are also seamless to consumers in a way that customers do not have to make any additional effort to realize gains in efficiency. Furthermore, codes and standards spur innovations and technological advances. For example, refrigerators improved efficiency significantly over the past 40 years, during which many rounds of state appliance standards led by California, as well as national standards, have increased significantly. And as a result, today's refrigerators use only about 20% of energy by refrigerators built 40 years ago. And now today, actually there are still many products available that are not covered by federal appliance standards, which means that state governments can implement their own appliance standards. But also I have to mention that currently there are just about 10 states that have their own appliance standards. So there are many states have a chance to implement their own and increase savings. So building codes have a little bit better status than appliance standards. As you can see in this slide, however, there are only 3 states or 3 or 4 states which have the latest building codes, and many states have outdated building codes. Furthermore, about half of all the states do not have building codes at all, meaning that there's significant energy saving potential available for many states from building codes. Strategy number 2, let customers know how their energy use compares. This consists of 3 approaches: energy disclosure requirements, benchmarking, and building rating systems. Lack of energy information is one of the largest barriers for building owners, potential home building owners, buyers, and apartment renters to implementing energy efficiency measures. These strategies make energy information visible to consumers and businesses and motivate building owners to upgrade their buildings and helping potential buyers and tenants select more efficient buildings. And recent studies found that these policies themselves can lead to a sizable amount of energy savings by just making consumption data available to them. And when combined with other programs, these policies can lead to bigger savings. And now we have there's a map here with building benchmarking and the energy disclosure policies. As you can see, there's much less states and cities have implemented, indicating that there's a tremendous amount of saving potential out there. Strategy number 3, enable government to lead by example. Actually, there are many states require state-owned buildings to be more efficient than the state energy code. We recommend states could be more aggressive, setting higher targets. Using lead by example, states actually can offer unique opportunities to improve fairness to energy efficiency. States and cities can achieve significant amount of energy bills through this approach and can reduce part of the budget dedicated to the over-covering building operating costs. This can result in property tax reduction, which means that benefits from state lead to lead by example initiative will eventually benefit all local residents and businesses. Next slide. Okay. Now, I'm going to focus on strategies specific to Ratepayer-Funded energy efficiency programs. Now, strategy number 4, expand program reach. This consists of three sub-strategies. All cost-effective energy efficiency requirements, improving cost-effectiveness screening, and expanding evaluation efforts to program participation. The first one, all cost-effective energy efficiency requirements, requires utilities and stakeholders to examine and develop all cost-effective energy savings potential and then targets. And this increases saving opportunity to all customers, including hard-to-reach customers. The second sub-strategy, which is cost-effectiveness screening. So all states use cost-effectiveness screening to develop programs. Therefore, it is very important to have good screening practices. So in order to support of all cost-effectiveness energy efficiency requirements, we recommend that PUC, Public Utility Commissions, examine cost-effectiveness screening practice and improve it. Mainly because the costs are often included, most of the costs are included, but benefits are often significantly underestimated, or some of the benefits are not included at all. The last sub-strategy. PUC should direct program administrators to examine and include program participant information in the energy efficiency plan and annual reports. This will provide valuable information to assess whether customers are served well under each program. Now I'm going to talk about strategy number 5, use targets, carrots, and sticks. PUC should establish targets to make sure that hard-to-reach customers are served. They can set targets in terms of number of customers, budgets, or amount of savings by program. PUC can add reward or penalties to motivate program administrators to reach targets. For example, in Maine, they have a statute to require a statewide energy efficiency administrator to use 10% of the program funding for low-income programs, and then another 10% for small business customers. The last, next strategy, number 6, collaborate. We recommend PUC establish permanent, strong collaboratives to allow many stakeholders, including hard-to-reach customers, low-income businesses, small businesses, and consumer advocates to provide inputs into program marketing, designs, and implementations. Next slide. Okay. Now I'm going to focus on strategies to improve program designs and then increase participation. Strategy number 7, bring efficiency to all customers. Utilities should develop and make various programs available to all types of customers, including low-income, multifamily, small businesses, in addition to other basic programs like new construction, retrofit, product type. And strategy number 8, maximize participation. Program administrators can take various innovative program marketing, incentive, and delivery approaches to increase participation for hard-to-reach customers. The handbook we released today have many examples of how to improve program designs. So please take a look at that for details. And last one, strategy number 9, transform the efficiency market. Market transformation initiatives intervene in a market to create a lasting change in manufacturing, distribution, and purchasing behavior, as well as building construction practices, and accelerate the adoption of cost-effectiveness cost-effective energy efficiency as a matter of standard practice for all residents and businesses. Examples include research and development, customer education, training for vendors, new construction, programs to support new codes and standards, and upstream incentive mechanism program. Upstream incentive program is a promising emerging strategy among market transformation efforts. This program provides incentive to partners in the market supply chain, such as manufacturers, distributors, instead of directly to consumers. I'll give you an example for distributors. So distributors often do not have many premium products in stock, including energy efficient products. And when in emergency, residents or businesses have to replace their own equipment, but then the only thing they find is the standard equipment because they don't have a stock for efficient products. So this program motivates, gives incentive to distributors to stock energy efficient products in the facilities so that customers can have better access to such products. And the last one, energy efficiency program funding. Okay. So as Jen mentioned, most of the energy efficiency programs are funded by system benefit charge. However, there are some states that use additional funding, such as regional carbon markets, like RGGI, Regional Greenhouse Gas Emission Initiative in Northeast, additional payment from forward capacity markets. And then some states, leading states also use financing mechanism to fund EE programs. And now every state will have access to a new source of funding under Clean Power Plan. Jen will talk about this in detail next.
Thank you, Kenji. So what we're going to explore now is the idea that the Clean Power Plan could be a new funding source for energy efficiency and how that could happen. And the reason for doing that is that additional funding can support energy efficiency services for additional customers, including hard-to-reach customers. So under the word temporary is the first approach. This is the Clean Power Plan's Clean Energy Incentive Program. So states interested in providing additional temporary funds for energy efficiency can opt into this program. And since we have done a separate webinar on the details of the mechanism, I'm not going to go into great detail. You can find them in the webinar on the Synapse website, but just to say that that's an option here. And again, it's temporary. It's for 2 years. So under here, we classify it as temporary. What I want to focus on in this slide is the 3 approaches under ongoing. So states interested in providing an additional ongoing funding stream for energy efficiency can take one of these 3 approaches. And each approach generates funds from each year of energy efficiency program savings. And these are funds that can be used to support program efforts in a future year or years. So I'm going to put together a couple scenarios so you can kind of get a sense for how this might work. And I just want to let you know that the dates that I've used are kind of illustrative. We don't know the time frame of all this yet. So let's just say that I'm a program administrator and it's December 2022. I'm almost through implementing my program budget for the year, and I'm preparing to report the savings I've generated from my efforts. I'm hoping to receive some revenues from my participation in the Clean Power Plan compliance in 2023 that I can put towards my program efforts as early as 2024. Let's just say that my state is complying using a math-based approach. So starting in 2023, I could either receive and sell allowances myself, or I could be allocated a portion of auction proceeds after the state sells allowances to coal or gas power plants that need them for compliance. In the event that my state is complying using a rate-based approach, starting again in 2023 as an example, I could sell credits to coal and gas power plants that I earned for every megawatt hour I saved in 2022. And again, could put the funds from these sales back into my programs in a future year. Further, an interesting topic to just think about is the idea that utility regulators can kind of build on this by, first of all, allowing me to use these funds for energy efficiency, And then also potentially even considering requiring me to direct a portion of these funds to programs serving hard-to-reach customers. So there's some interesting funding scenarios for you to consider. And now I'm going to turn it back to my colleague, Sarah Jackson, to discuss Synapse resources and close, and we look forward to your questions.
Thanks for that great presentation, you guys. We'll turn to audience questions in just a minute, but first I wanted to make everyone aware of a couple of things. One is that at Synapse we've been developing our modeling capabilities for evaluating the final Clean Power Plan, and this schematic here on the slide outlines our Clean Power Plan Toolkit, which contains the many tools we've developed or adapted in order to assess compliance options and outcomes. We also have a number of resources available on our website, including the handbook and fact sheet on energy efficiency from this webinar. We also have other fact sheets and past webinars on Clean Power Plan and other relevant topics, a number of reports that have been issued, and we have a number of blog posts that have been written by our staff experts. And lastly, stay tuned. We have at least one more webinar coming up that will be on bill impacts of the Clean Power Plan, and that's tentatively scheduled for January 12th, 2016. And you can also sign up for our newsletter to receive future notifications on these webinars and for other interesting information coming out of Synapse. Okay, well, let's turn to some questions. First question we have is, what recommendations do you have for states who want to pursue some of these strategies, and how should states go about it?
So I can start with that one. This is Jennifer. So really, the strategies, I think, they're not in any particular order, just to let you know. 1 through 10 was random. It may make sense to, in fact, it likely makes sense to implement a few at the same time, especially if you require some, some substantial lead time to develop a public utility commission order or for some state process in order to implement. So there's a couple of important considerations I'll raise. One is who bears the responsibility for implementing the strategy, because this can have an impact on the ease and time frame for implementation. We've grouped the strategies into the 4 color-coded categories, as each category kind of requires a different set of processes and actors for implementation, and so that was some of the rationale for that grouping. The other thing to keep in mind is that the strategies can have interactive effects, and Kenji raised that in his discussion. So implementing a state policy like benchmarking might drive more participants to ratepayer-funded efforts once information on their building energy use becomes available. So you may see, if you implement one, some effects from that in the ratepayer-funded efforts that you conduct. I mean, the other consideration, I think, is that each state's going to have a unique mix of hard-to-reach customers. So it's definitely a consideration. Certainly, if you have like high poverty rates in your state, that might, drive you to think about strategies for low-income customers more than other states.
Thanks, Jen. And just a reminder for folks, we have the email address here. If you want to ask any questions, please send them to webinar@synapse-energy.com. We have a few more here. What state-specific considerations should states be aware of when determining the next steps that they should take? So, as I said before, each state has kind of a unique mix of hard-to-reach customers. I talked about low-income customers, but certainly in multifamily, those properties tend to be more clustered in urban areas. So, again, each state will have kind of a different mix of these types of customers. One thing we find kind of over and over again is that information on hard-to-reach customers, including the number of customers that are eligible for programs and recent participation in programs, is not always readily available. So I find that, in general, I find that few utilities can answer a simple question, what % of your customers have you reached with energy efficiency to date? So tracking and reporting of this basic information can be really important to prioritizing efforts. And what I've seen on the ground is that it takes time to get this information, to track it and then report it. So it's one thing that states should be aware of in terms of preparing to expand their reach and understand more
about how, the extent to which they're reaching the utilities or program administrators are reaching the entire customer base.
All right, let's see. Next question we've got is, might some states prioritize one strategy over another, and could you give some examples of this? Of prioritization, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can address that. So it's important to know which strategies have already been implemented or partially implemented. Some states have implemented or are working on implementing these strategies. We did not conduct a full assessment of which states have done what kind of policy strategy and the extent to which they are making progress on each of these strategies. But we have included maps with information about which states have addressed some of the strategies where they are readily available. States can start by determining where they have made progress to date on these strategies. And also a great source is SCEEE, American Council for Energy Efficient Economy, has a number of useful reports, including State Energy Scorecard and City Energy Scorecard. Those have a great summary of many different policies and programs. And also states can prioritize their efforts based on their unique mix of how to reach customers. So as actually Jen mentioned, if a state has a higher poverty rates, then they should definitely establish strong low-income programs.
Yeah, I mean, I think, states don't have to choose one strategy at a time, as we said. They can be working on, the nice thing about this is we've identified both kind of like efforts that are directly related to ratepayer-funded efforts as well as overarching state policies and practices. So a state could be working on an overarching state policy and practice at the same time as a public utility commission might be working on adjusting, refining, improving both programs and program designs. So there's, it's not kind of like one at a time. States can be working on a bunch of these at the same time.
Okay, thanks you guys. So our next question is, I think this goes to Kenji, what you were talking about. I think you mentioned certain states, there was a slide showing certain states that had adopted their own efficiency standards for appliances. Mm-hmm. And the question is, will implementation of these stricter appliance standards drive the market to create more efficient appliances in the future?
Yes, I mean, historically, that really appliance standards is the major policy that drive efficiency of new products, as I mentioned for refrigerators. But there are many other products available. Appliance standards available that have driven the efficiency in the past.
And regarding the interactive effects, so ratepayer-funded efficiency efforts are a build on top of building codes and appliance standards. So they have to achieve greater than the baseline, which is often established by appliance standards and building energy codes. So the interactive effect there is that higher building energy codes and appliance standards drive ratepayer-funded efforts to explore technologies that are even more efficient.
Yeah, let me add one thing. So in terms of the impact of the appliance standards, the bigger the state, the bigger the impact on the products, making products available. For example, California has a huge impact on new appliance standards, new products. So if you're a small state, you could try to coordinate, collaborate with your neighboring states and establish state regional-wide appliance standards as part of the clean energy plan, clean power plan.
Mm-hmm. And I bet manufacturers would appreciate that too.
Yeah.
That's a good point. So Jen, you mentioned building standards just in your answer, and we had a question from someone who points out that there's a failure for buildings, for delivery on buildings, in that building inspectors are not always trained to enforce stronger building codes, and there's virtually no training programs or requirements that builders and contractors demonstrate that they can deliver these construction techniques. So the question is, how can builders be brought into the process? Are there downstream, or upstream, I think you said, or downstream incentives that could work for builders to bring them along with the efficiency?
Yeah. So this is a sort of a market transformation initiative. There are actually many states that provide training to building code officials and also building community about the new building code. And experience today revealed that training is very critical to improve enforcement of new building codes.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, energy efficiency enforcement, especially for building codes, is really essential. And you know, one thing that we've started to see develop is, again, speaking to the interactive effects, ratepayer-funded efforts offering some training or additional incentives, again, to make sure that building, the folks that are making the buildings are aware of the codes and are being properly trained. So there's some coordination that's available through ratepayer-funded efforts as well to support building energy codes. Work can be made available.
Great. And one follow-up from the same person is, I guess, a shout out to the EU requirements that new buildings be nearly net zero by the end of 2020, and then that, I guess, public buildings must also meet this criteria by the end of 2018.
Great.
And the question was, is that approach a useful model for the U.S., do you think?
Yes, definitely. And actually, California, Massachusetts have building codes. They plan to implement net zero energy building codes by, I guess, like 2020 or 2030.
So it's coming.
Yep, it's coming.
For some states it's coming, and for others we hope they'll join in.
Lofty goals, are good goals. Okay. So here's a question on essentially how you would think about allocating allowances. You had mentioned that one of these funding mechanisms is that you could in some way allocate allowances to energy efficiency program administrators. And so the question is asking for guidance on the extent to which states should allocate allowances to existing programs that reach hard-to-reach customers versus expansion of those programs. So if you were using low-income weatherization as an example, would you recommend allocation of allowances for levels of EE that meet the existing programs, or would you want to see the allocation be only to help achieve higher levels than those programs?
So yes, I think current levels of ratepayer-funded energy efficiency vary widely, but in general, we see a number of states that are certainly have a ways to go in terms of what they could achieve. So for the majority of states, I think it definitely would be additional. And, I don't think we've reached the point where any leading state is at a level where we would think that would, be a trade-off. In other words, I think for all states at this point, it could be an additional source of funds and a build rather than a replacement of existing or offset of existing efforts.
Okay, great. So this next question is tied in a lot more with the Clean Power Plan, I think, than the other questions. This is asking, how would you answer some of the counter-arguments that come up in different contexts? For example, a state that gets a lot of its power from fossil plants in the neighboring state might argue that investing in EE, in energy efficiency, under the Clean Power Plan will benefit the neighbor by reducing their need to run the plants, but it won't bring as much benefit for the state actually spending on the EE programs it won't benefit as much in terms of their compliance with the Clean Power Plan. So under mass-based, can the state doing the energy efficiency generate allowances or credits to be able to sell, or is that only possible under rate? And I can take that question, actually, because I think this question suggests why states should work together. So under a math-based approach, energy efficiency has great benefits, but essentially the goals are being achieved because overall emissions are being reduced, because energy efficiency is reducing the need to run those plants. And as Jen laid out, there's ways to allocate credits to those folks, but in state-by-state plans, if each state were to go it alone, then a state could only give the credits to the programs in the state. So I think that the multi-state approaches and the linked trading approaches that EPA lays out in the Clean Power Plan are key for these exact questions and are why states should be working together in multi-state regional groups to ensure that all the benefits are captured and all of the programs are given the proper benefit. So I have a couple more questions, but we do have time for more if people have more questions. What about, this one is, what other types, I'm sorry, I'm reading it wrong. What about other types of efficiency that is going on in the market besides ratepayer-funded efforts? Are these important as well?
So, yes, absolutely. I mean, we certainly spoke to building codes and appliance standards, which we believe are very, very important. Another one that comes up sometimes is energy service companies, which are private companies that are using a different business model to implement energy efficiency. These are important too, and we certainly don't mean to ignore them or not pay them any attention. But I think certainly when we're talking about fairness, they just don't pose as much of a fairness issue because basically the customers that pay for the measures receive the benefits. So it's a different model than ratepayer-funded efficiency where all customers contribute to the effort, so all customers should benefit.
And this may be related. This question is, might directing more resources to customers that are more expensive to serve, such as the low-income customers that you've been mentioning, the hard-to-reach customers, would that reduce resources that are used for the other lower-cost customers?
So this gets to the question that I think we answered before, which is, you know, in the way states are kind of currently acting, or at least a number of states, is that there are budget constraints for energy efficiency. So under a budget constraint or a fixed budget scenario, certainly changing an allocation of resources from one customer to another will result in fewer resources for the group of one group of customers. But we, as we talked about previously, constraining or reducing the budget exacerbates rather than improves the fairness. It's really unfair if fewer customers or no customers get any of the benefit of energy efficiency. So it's not really in the public interest to further limit the number of participants in these programs. A better alternative is for, if I can speak to a couple of the specific policies or strategies that we talked about, is for a state to implement an all-cost-effective energy efficiency policy. So this requires program administrators to identify and acquire all of the cost-effective efficiency that's available. And then on top of that, states can utilize the Clean Power Plan as a new funding source to scale up energy efficiency budgets so that they can serve more customers or eventually over time all customers.
Thanks, Jen. So a couple more. This question is, what about customers that have already participated and don't feel like they can do anything more for more efficiency?
So if you've already participated in efficiency, great. You're already experiencing bill savings year over year. So this speaks to the fact that when you implement energy efficiency measures, you experience savings for a number of years into the future. On average, I think for residential programs, it's somewhere around 7 to 10 years. And some of the weatherization or heating system measures can be in effect for up to 20 years. So you would be experiencing bill savings year over year for the lifetime of the measure or group of measures that you've implemented. And What we've seen is that it takes a relatively small amount of effort to offset the small incremental charge per kilowatt hour for energy efficiency programs. For states that we've looked at, it's in the neighborhood of some lighting measures, you know, some light bulbs essentially for your home. So to the extent you've installed more than that, then you're really, you've really got some good savings going, and those are going to continue into the future. And so that's great news for you. I think, you know, one thing we run into a lot of times is people say, oh, we participated in the past, so, and we don't have the opportunity to participate again. But really, with the fact of the matter is you're saving so much over time into the future. So those savings are still there, even if you participated a couple years ago. So good for you, and you're still experiencing the benefit.
Great. So this last question here says, it seems like an unrealistic goal to get all customers to participate in each year. Is this what you mean by fairness? So
no. It would be great to get all customers to participate in each year, but that's a rather unrealistic, I think, goal. So I just talked about how energy efficiency benefits last for 10 to 20 years, let's just say. So customers that implement energy efficiency today will see lower bills for 10 years into the future on average. So think about it this way. If a program administrator reached 10% of its customers each year over a 10-year period, you'd really be approaching serving most of your customers at the end of that 10-year period. So that's kind of how we think about it. You don't have to serve every customer every single year, but the idea is over a number of years, you would be serving all customers. And one metric that's really important to look at that is kind of a cumulative participation rate. So you might see, you know, if you look in the first year, 5% of all your customers have participated, then the next year 15% have participated, the next year 20%. So you can kind of track that increase in penetration of your customer base over time. It's very interesting to see. And for some programs, I think there is some data out there actually for multifamily programs, which are showing that they have reached 60% or 70% of the multifamily buildings in certain territories. So the penetration for states that have collected that data can be rather high over, you know, for programs that have been in effect for a number of years.
Okay. Well, those are all the questions we've gotten. If you want to send any last-minute questions in while we wrap up, we'll do what we can to answer them. But thank you all so much for joining us, and Jen and Kenji, thank you so much for this really informative presentation.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And we've got contact information here on the screen. If you have any questions that you think of after we end the session, please do send them along, and we'll do our best to respond. Thanks very much.